My name's Lucas. I've been starting seeds for over a decade, and today I want to show you how to start your own seeds for success every single time. Let's get into it. To start out, you're going to need some potting mix. I've got a few different types here. The brand doesn't matter, but what matters most is the structure of that mix. So here I've got some moisture mix. This is actually meant for hydroponics. And then this here is a high porosity mix, which means it's going to be really light and airy and help fluff up that soil so that you don't get that really high water content that could potentially rot your seeds. I've gone ahead and I've added in this type and this type. I've mixed it up a bit. This is what you see here. This is pretty good, but it's still a little too dense for my liking. So I'm gonna add in some high porosity mix. Next up, I'm gonna be adding in some perlite. Now perlite is something that's found in most potting mixes already, but I always like to add a bit extra to just increase that drainage a bit more. So this is what perlite looks like. It's just this kind of crumbly, white, light volcanic substance. And what I'm gonna do is just add a decent amount here. And I'm just gonna mix it up. Now I've mixed up the potting mix. It looks great, light and fluffy, and it's gonna hold on to water, but it's also gonna let water drain out, which is really key when starting seeds. If your potting mix has poor drainage, this is a problem. It can cause your seeds to rot before they sprout, and if they do sprout, the seedlings won't develop properly because the roots won't get enough oxygen. Now you don't have to use multiple bags like I did here. It's just something I do just in case one of the bags isn't good enough. I've had that happen in the past, and so mixing in a couple different varieties of mix will ensure that your seedlings will get off to a good start. Before we move on, we need to discuss one more thing when it comes to potting mix, and that is fertilizer. Now, these bags here contain fertilizer, which means that I don't have to go in and add fertilizer to these seedlings as they're growing. So do yourself a favor and look for bags that contain a bit of fertilizer to feed your seedlings as they grow. Now we're gonna get into planting, but first we need to hydrate the mix because it's pretty dry. So how I do that is I just get a bottle of warm water. It can be tap water, rainwater, whatever you have. And I just kind of slowly disperse it around the mix. And this part gets a little messy. You might want to use gloves for this. Just mix up the mix. And this will pre-moisten your potting soil, and it'll prevent you from overwatering it when you water your seeds. The next step is to grab some seed starting containers. That could be pretty much anything from toilet paper rolls to yogurt cups to standard nursery trays. This here is actually a piece that I cut off of a 72 cell seed tray. And the reason I did that is because I don't always like to start a lot of seeds at once. I like to start them in batches, so this lets me do that. Here we go. We're just gonna fill this up with our pre-moistened, fluffy, ultra deluxe potting mix. Real simple, nothing fancy to this. What you're gonna wanna do is just tamp it down a little to make sure that potting mix is nice and level. Top it up as needed, and that's all there is to it. Next, get your seeds. Today I'm going to be planting some tall Utah celery. I've grown this before and I want to give it another shot this season. So when you're choosing your seeds, it's really important that you choose varieties that are going to be hardy and that are going to grow well in your area. Seed packets and catalogs will be your best friend because they contain a wealth of information that'll allow you to judge which seeds are going to perform best in your specific locale and climate. And also, they're gonna give you a very important piece of information, and that is days to maturity. Days to maturity, DTM, or days to harvest, is something you're gonna find on your seed packs. And this piece of information tells you how many days it'll take from transplanting into the garden to your first harvest. So in the case of this celery, it says 100 days to harvest. From the time I transplant these into my garden, it's gonna take about 100 days or around 3 months before I can see my first crop that I can actually harvest and eat. So this is quite a long time. For tomatoes and peppers, typically it's around 2 to 2.5 months before you get that first harvest. But whatever crop you're growing, this is a great metric to determine what's gonna be the best variety to put in your garden in your area. For example, I live in Ontario, and as you probably noticed already, there's snow on the ground still. And we have a relatively short growing season. That means that I wanna pick varieties that are gonna mature in a shorter period of time. On some seed packs and catalogs, it'll be very direct and it'll simply say something like northern producer or grows very well in a southern climate. And these are great indicators of whether or not that particular crop is going to do well in your area. Timing your plantings correctly is something that's so critical if you want to optimize your harvests. And most seed packs will tell you when to sow your seeds. Now, in this case, for the celery, it says start seeds indoors 10 to 12 weeks before the last frost date. In my area, the last frost date is around May 24th. Typically, I don't plant out my warm season vegetables until around June 1st, but knowing your last frost date is something you can easily find out by doing a quick Google search, and then just using the seed pack's directions, count back the number of weeks, and that'll tell you when you should be planting your seeds. 12 weeks back from June 1st, that's 3 months back, which is around March 1st. Today is March 2nd, so it's the perfect time for me to be planting these celery seeds. Okay, so it's time to plant your seeds. Right now I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. So with these celery seeds, they're actually pretty small, and some seeds are obviously larger than others. I mean, just look how small these celery seeds are. Microscopic almost. There's some different techniques you can use for small seeds. I've seen people dampen the end of a toothpick and use that to grab 1 or 2 seeds at a time and place those in the planting hole. I don't do that. I'm pretty unscientific about it. I just sprinkle a few seeds in each cell, just like so. Not rocket science. If you do this right, you're probably going to get pretty much 100% germination. So don't plant too many seeds. That's another big mistake a lot of gardeners do. They do too many seeds because they're really excited. They're overzealous. They end up with way too many seedlings. I've done this before, and it's just a mess. I'm just going to sprinkle a very thin layer of mix over top of these. In fact, for a seed this small, typically I don't even put any soil on top. I just pat them down like this a little to ensure that soil to seed contact. The planting depth really depends on the type of seed you're sowing. So for example, with pumpkins, I would push the entire seed, because it's pretty big, right underneath the soil surface. I cover that up and that would do just fine. With tomatoes and peppers, I like to just put them in the center of each cell and then sprinkle a bit of mix over top. That works just fine. But again, for the tiny seeds like this and lettuce and a lot of flowers and other different types of vegetables, it's fine if you just leave them on the surface. And then I get my mist bottle. I like to use warm water or lukewarm water, and I'm just going to mist the top here. It's always a great idea to label your containers, that way you won't forget what you planted. I'm not going to in this case because I know what this is, but do yourself a favor, you won't regret it later on, because I've made the mistake so many times of not labeling. You get out in the garden and you're like, what variety of tomato is this? I have no idea. So label. Don't label people, but label your seedlings. Trust me, it's going to help you so much. So finally, after you've made your potting mix, you've sown your seeds, you've given them a good mist, now it's time to put them in a nice warm place. Now, depending on the variety, you may want to use a seedling heat mat underneath. This is something I recommend for warmer season crops like peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, because they germinate better at a higher temperature of around 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. But for celery, I know they germinate just fine at around 75, which is around room temperature, so they should be okay. Light. It's something you need to give your seeds after they germinate, not before. They don't need light to germinate, at least most seeds don't. But afterwards, it's so critical to give them a nice, strong, direct source of light. Chances are you're going to be sowing most of your seeds in the late winter, when it's still pretty dark out during the day. Today is an exception here, but usually it's pretty cloudy and there isn't enough light to keep these seedlings growing nice and healthy indoors. So what you're going to need is an artificial light setup. There are many different options for LED grow lights on the market today. Just go to Amazon, you can find some really quickly that'll run you between $100 to $200, and they'll work just fine. Now you know how to start seeds indoors for success every single time. I wish you the best of luck on your seed starting journey. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe because it's going to be a really exciting season and I don't want you to miss out.